Hi, welcome to the Mediatwits number 177. I'm Mark Glazer, executive editor and publisher at MediaShift. Today we'll be talking about tablet news editions running into some trouble, and are they stagnating now as smartphones become bigger and more popular? Recently, Canada's Postmedia closed down some of their evening news apps. So we'll be talking about what's to come for tablets. Are they being caught in the middle between smartphones and laptops and so many hybrid devices on this week's podcast? But first, a word from our sponsor. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. Indeed, I am at NextSpace here in San Francisco, and my 2-year-old son is at the Next Kids next door. So before we get into our discussion, I want to introduce our panel. This week we have Andrew Lee joining us from American University, Anthony Ha from TechCrunch, Douglas Hebard from Talking New Media, Mario Garcia of Garcia Media, all the way from Dubai, and our producer, Jefferson Yan in LA. So recently, the news came out that Postmedia was closing down these evening tablet editions for Ottawa Citizen, Montreal Gazette, Calgary Herald. But meanwhile, the Toronto Star is going all in on a new tablet app. And I feel like, is this, 2011 when the tablets were all announced, everyone was talking about tablet editions, and, all the publications and publishers were really putting a lot of resources into this. But now things have really changed when it comes to tablet sales. They've really kind of leveled off. They've declined, really, for Apple. So the question is, what to do about tablets? Where do they fit kind of in the ecosystem of everything? Mario, you helped work on these Postmedia tablet apps. What went wrong for them?
I believe that this was a matter of not giving these products probably enough time for them to grow. But at the same time, this industry is changing so rapidly. I mean, I wrote a book titled Storytelling in the Age of the Tablet, which was a digital book the moment the iPad came out. About 11 months later, that book had to be rewritten. It hasn't been rewritten yet. By now, there will be probably 3 editions, all of which will be very different from the previous one. Things change rapidly. And by the time we were doing these tablets, the tablet was seen as a lean back experience. We're dealing with the two tempos. You're throwing raw meat to the lions all day long, and that's what happens on mobile. Then the lean back is the cooked steak, just like the printed newspaper might be or used to be. And so we plan these evening editions totally on the basis of a very lean back, take off your shoes, relax, turn on your TV if you will, and you're going to be reading great features of the day, looking at videos and so on. A few months later, I was working with the McClatchy newspapers in the US, and we did tablet editions. By then, we incorporated more news into those tablet editions. Those are still going. And we tested with readers, and it was a very different reaction from the one we had when dealing with a Canadian project 9-10 months earlier, where the idea was, give us a magazine in the evening. Totally different. I'm beginning to realize that there is more lean forward in our lives than lean back, whether we want to admit it or not, globally. I mean, I was just working in Norway, now I'm working in Dubai. We now have this tendency to be constantly wanting to be connected. So even if you're doing a lean back mode with a tablet, we are leaning forward to see what's happening. What am I missing out on? So the tablets for the McClatchy newspapers have local news, sports news. So you're leaning back, lean forward, see what's happening, then go back to reading. This is going to be very difficult for newsrooms to orchestrate, to really create this, what I call the journalism of at a glance and the journalism of interruptions, combined with a more in-depth, very difficult gymnastics to accomplish. So I think that the Postmedia papers, the Postmedia tablets, should have probably added a morning one and then moved towards a newsier kind of product without abandoning the feature.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you wrote about on your blog, there's also some Danish tablet apps that have done really well. So it's not really, it depends on the audience, right? It's something we always want to make a pronouncement, tablet apps are dead or tablet apps should be this or that, but I'm guessing it's might be audience dependent.
Not only that, but one interesting fact about Scandinavians is that they have moved the closing time of the print edition much earlier. I mean, the Americans are not doing this. The Americans are still hoping that people are going to waiting for that score on the printed newspaper tomorrow, which is nonsense. Really, I mean, they do. I'm 68 years old. I've been in this business 42 years. The people telling me this are younger than me, and they tell me, no, we close at 11:30 because we wait for the results of whatever. Results of what? I mean, anybody who's following the sport is going to get it immediately. Yeah, but anyway, that's another story. The Scandinavians, who are very advanced about all of this, sometimes close the print edition at 9 p.m. So what happens? They put it into the tablet. Big success there, especially with women. The women are saying, we put the kids out to bed, 9:30, we get that tablet, and we go through tomorrow's newspaper, what they call the e-paper, which, by the way, the Americans give you just a PDF. The Scandinavians already do enhanced editions. It's not just flipping the pages. They do what I call keeping the finger happy. I mean, suddenly you hit a photo and it turns into a photo gallery. You hit a photo and then you see a video that goes with that story. And people read the intuitive sort of print experience on the tablet. That was not happening in Canada because you were doing this at 6 o'clock in the evening and you close your printed newspaper at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So these are areas that deal with frequency, with notions of frequency, with cultures in the newsroom that have been there forever, and that's what I do. That's basically what I do. So the tablets are thriving in some markets where they have been constantly reshaped. You start with one idea and then you change it. All of those that are thriving have a morning edition, which is very newsy, and an evening edition, which is more of a combination of news and features and the PDF.
Yeah. Anthony, what do you think? Where does this leave publishers? I mean, how should they be? Should they be developing still special tablet editions? I mean, does it really depend on the publisher? I mean, where do you think all this is going? Because there's so many different devices now.
Right. I mean, I thought that was an interesting discussion when you were talking about the successful tablet apps because it made me wonder, I mean, how many of them are actually tablet specific? Because I can imagine, including tablet-specific experiences or experiences designed for that larger screen, but I feel like it's an area where, the lines between them are becoming so blurred. I mean, there's that sort of horrible term phablet now, which I refuse to use except for this will be the one time I use it during this conversation, and I do feel like the idea of that you would create something specifically for tablet and tablet as sort of the savior of publishers seems kind of outdated versus, well, the tablet is one of many channels through which I'm reaching my readers. Realistically, smartphones are probably going to be the predominant one, and then tablets can become something where I can deliver a slightly richer, better-looking experience. Seems to me to make more sense.
Yeah, and so it's and with all the different sizes and everything, I mean, it's hard to develop an app for every single one of those things anyway, right?
Right. I mean, it's always easier said than done. You're just like, oh yeah, just build for everything, and it's going to be great for everything. And of course, that's usually not the case unless you've got just a giant pile of venture money. Otherwise, there's going to be either you have a responsive website or an app that kind of works on every device. But more likely, you can probably only create a genuinely great experience on a couple, I would imagine.
Yeah. And Douglas, what do you think about the recent news with Apple is that the iPad sales were down 20% this quarter versus a year ago. They've had 7 quarters of iPad sales going lower than the year ago quarter, and they're coming out with this iPad Pro. I mean, do you think that's going to give them a chance to really get more bring sexy back to tablets at all?
No. No, it's also a completely different market as well. As you know, it's kind of going more towards the professional market. I mean, what we've wanted with tablet editions and tablets is a consumer device that people have all the time that they will read our publications on. Well, the smartphone obviously is being used for that. But one of the issues is I don't think we should read too much into the decline in sales. If you looked at television sales the last couple of years, once everyone upgraded to an HD TV, sales kind of went down. The question really becomes, what's the penetration of tablets in the market? And the fact that it's reached 45% for adults or older adults and almost 50% now for young adults is a pretty good number if you think about it. I was looking here at how many tablets Apple had sold when Murdoch launched the Daily, and it was 15 million worldwide. What are the chances that the Daily is going to succeed in such a small market? And when he closed it, they'd only hit 55 million. At the end of this quarter, Apple finally hit 300 million, and then you've got all these other tablets. So the market is better. The question is, are people using a tablet with them all the time so that you'll read your newspaper on that, your magazine, or are they, of course, moving towards their smartphones? And I think that that does lead you to think you need to be on every device in some manner.
Yeah. And Andrew, you have, the tablet has been in this weird kind of caught between, where is it? It's in kind of a no man's land. It went from being the big savior and being wonderful and all that, and now it seems like it's kind of stuck.
Yeah, as Douglas said, there's no shame in where the tablet has come to since its introduction, right? If you're talking about almost 50% penetration, that's really impressive. But every indication is that's flattening out at that part of the curve, right? So it's actually not seeing a lot of growth. And if you look at Apple's latest numbers since the iPad's introduction, the numbers or the revenue from the iPad is actually now below the Macs, and everyone kind of thought that desktops and laptops are not the model going forward. So if iPad is not meeting the revenue of even the older legacy products that Apple has, that's definitely something to look at. But still plenty of people use tablets all the time. If you ever take a plane flight, you know that there's tons of tablets being used. It's great for certain applications for kids' education, but similar to what Douglas talked about with TV, the replacement rate for tablets is not as high, certainly as handsets and other things, right? So one of the downsides of the tablet is that when you buy a tablet, you're pretty much laying out the entire cash amount for it. Whereas if you're looking at handsets, they're kind of absorbed in the monthly price that you pay for your mobile plan. Or if you're a teenager, it's kind of automatically in there as a second or third handset. It's actually even cheaper. So that's kind of what tablets are up against in terms of the consumer market positioning. And if you look at the higher end in terms of laptops, those are some things that maybe the business pays for, and you don't directly purchase those things, or you can bake it into the cost of education. So the tablets kind of, live in this weird space where they're not replaced very often. I'm using an iPad from 4 or 5 years ago, and it still works perfectly well for Netflix, for gaming, for Facebook. So there's no real compelling reason why I need to replace it, and that's probably what you see in those numbers. And the tablet, like the Daily from the Wall Street Journal and other types of content, were still kind of based around this whole idea of appointment reading, right? And that's where tablets still are really good, right? The kind of the way that tablets are used are that's the last thing that you see before you go to sleep. It's by your bedside. When you're stuck on a plane, you have the tablet with a long battery life. So they still really are pretty much, based around a physical location, appointment consumption, but it's really not for the types of things that Mario was talking about in terms of making your finger happy and micro engagements throughout the day. That's where your handset is really going to be where everything is consumed, and that's where things dominate, at least for the millennials and the newer generation of folks.
Yeah, and the one knock against tablets has always been it's not really good for creation. It is this lean back idea, and as Mario said, there's not a whole lot of lean. People don't maybe want to lean back, or they want to interact, they want to write something, they want to post, they want to share, and you never really think about that when you're in a tablet app.
Right, and we kind of think of an entire experience as either all lean back or all lean forward, and as Mario said, we're seeing this kind of hybridization of experiences, right, where you want to lean back and experience something, but then you want to interact on social media, and then you want to consume some more, but then you want to move the interactive around and work with it. So it's actually much harder to design for these things, and it might explain why, there's a very famous deal from the LA Unified School District for buying tablets for every single kid. And then they probably realize after testing it, this is not a great creation device. Do we want just kids looking at the screen and not doing anything with it other than consuming? So it's a much harder thing to try to figure out where to go with the tablet in terms of being a multitasking productivity device. Apple's only now adding the ability to have a split screen and have two apps on the screen at the same time. But even then, it's kind of clunky. You need a new, very expensive iPad to do that. So the jury's still out on kind of the tablet's future as a productivity device.
Yeah.
And I have to add, Mark, if I may,
Please
that
do.
publishers in newsrooms, which is where I work, publishers are now, to be honest with you, putting more emphasis and money into smaller devices, mobile devices like the phone. They believe that people have migrated here, and this is where things are happening. I work with editors, in Scandinavia, in Norway particularly, with Aftenposten, where the editor tells us we put out 1,000 front pages every single day because the home page is ignored. Nobody comes to a home page. I mean, here, so you built your house and you paid a ton to have the front door beautifully done, but you didn't worry about the garage door or the kitchen door, and everybody comes in through the back. Nobody sees the front. So that is affecting advertising. That's affecting how we design all of this, and so every article becomes a home page, because what's happening is most people come to an article through social media, and so their first contact with the brand is going to be, chances are, here, and it's going to be one article. So we are now designing articles that are almost like a homepage. They have to have the brand very clearly stated there, so that if you share it, people know where you came from. And so more references. In some of these homepages, we now have the 5 most shared, the 5 things you shouldn't miss, because every article is a homepage. And that changes the dynamics of how, so tablets are not even in this discussion at all, I must add. It's mobile.
Right. Yeah, and this whole idea of an edition, like a evening edition or something, I mean, that just doesn't even fit into this conversation that you're talking about, where it's all about, you want this piece of information you found through Facebook, through Twitter, through some other way. It's different. Anthony, what do you think about, a lot of publishers, they're spending a lot of time distributing their content to these other platforms, to Snapchat, to Facebook Instant Articles. I mean, that really leaves even apps behind. I mean, how much should publishers even put into their app, development?
Well, I think that, this distributed strategy is sort of a necessity. I mean, look, if that's where the readers are and you sort of just put your foot down and say, well, I don't want to be on these platforms that these other companies own, then you're just going to, I think, really be left behind. But certainly that has its own challenges in terms of monetization, in terms of like building a relationship with the reader beyond the one article. And I do think that the app still has value in the sense of, the person who loves, like I have like my Wall Street Journal app that I read like every day, and I have my New Yorker app, and so there's certain things that I'm going to, the things that I have a real relationship with where I might still use the app, but you have to imagine that, the vast majority of the time, especially if you're not one of these sort of marquee brand publishers, that most people are going to find you on social media. And so not to say that you shouldn't think about the app, but you have to understand that, a lot of, especially how people are going to find you initially, is going to be elsewhere. That said, of course, it's still important. The readers who use the app are going to be arguably the most important readers, the loyal readers, the ones who come back every day. So you don't necessarily want to neglect them entirely.
Yeah. Do you agree, Douglas? Do you think apps are still going to have? I mean, they're important to some extent, but maybe that might change in the next generation.
Well, I do think apps are important, but what we haven't found is a way to make app discoverability easy, and how to launch a tablet publication or app publication successfully. I mean, if you think about the print model that we've had for years and years and years, we know how to do that. At least magazines know how to do that. Take Meredith, for instance. They're going to launch a new magazine for all recipes. Well, they already have a database of their web users. They already have a database of all their other magazine readers. And so the day they launch, they have over 300,000 people reading the magazine, and by the next issue, they were able to have a $500,000 rate base. Well, Postmedia launches an app for like Montreal Gazette for iPad. I thought it's a very, very nice app. But their total circulation is about 60,000. And it's, the app, you develop the app, you put it into the App Store. Apple doesn't even tell you when it's going live. It's a big surprise. How much readership do you have that first day? And so we're having to discover this. Now, if Apple lost their mind and said to Postmedia, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to tell you everybody that owns an iPad in Quebec. We're going to give you their name. We're going to give you their email address. Heck, we even have their credit card information, don't we? And gave that to them, they could do a marketing strategy to launch the app successfully. Of course, Apple's not going to do that, but that's how a magazine gets launched. So we have to learn how to launch these products as we would. I'm speaking, of course, from the traditional publisher standpoint.
Right.
We have to be good at this the same way we're good at print.
Yeah, and I mean, Apple, if anything, they've got Apple News now. I mean, they'd rather have everyone go through their app. They prefer, everyone, there weren't any other news apps, in a way.
Well, they don't make very much money from us. If you think about all the money that Apple makes from every digital edition ever created, how much does that really count? We're just a blip, unfortunately. And Apple and Samsung and Google and Amazon are more important to us, unfortunately, than we are to them.
Yeah, no doubt. Andrew, what's your take on these kind of different, the kind of mixture of Microsoft? They have Microsoft Book, and they have, with the iPad Pro coming out. What do you think about these kind of new devices? I think, this is a real convergence going on now between laptop, tablet, and smartphone, where, how are you even going to be able to do research about these, these categories that aren't even categories anymore?
I know. I'm not hopeful about the Surface Book or these types of things trying to be something that they're not. It's a very unnatural act. Even if you look at the design of the Surface Book, they've got to flip through hoops to even have it stand upright without tipping over. So if that's the case, then you're probably not in a good space design-wise or utility-wise. So I'm not that hopeful for it. I mean, just, I love the saying when we talk about photography. There's a saying in photography that the best camera you have is the one that you have with you. It doesn't matter how expensive or nice or high-end the camera is. If it's bulky and you never take it with you out in the field, it doesn't matter what you have. The best camera is that little point and shoot in your pocket. And it's the same thing with mobiles now, right? A phablet, apologies to Anthony, is a great device. And anecdotally, you just see a lot of people saying, I have an iPad, I just wind up not using it very much because I have this gigantic iPhone 6 Plus, and it does everything I need to. And it's on all the time, it's in my pocket, it lasts 2 days on battery, and it doesn't matter whether I'm near Wi-Fi or not. And I think that's going to be the real deciding factor, right? Always on, big screen, good enough to do everything, great camera. What else do you need? And everything else is kind of a device you use 20% of the time. And even if you're at work with a laptop and something that is high-end, a lot of apps like Instagram and Snapchat don't run on anything except a mobile. So that just spells the future for what the new generation of folks are going to be used to.
Yeah, Anthony, you agree about smartphone, winning out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that just what you were saying earlier, Andrew, about the idea that it's the thing that's with you, right? And I found that even in my own reading, I will, a lot of times I prefer reading things on my tablet, and that's always a better experience. But because the phone is the thing that's with me, I get the notification that people are tweeting about it or whatever. I find that I'm reading more and more on the phone, even if I'm like, oh, I should just go read this on my tablet, and then you're like, well, the phone's fine. Like, why bother? So I suspect. That's yeah, that I totally agree. And I should also say that I agree that these large phones are like, I'm less convinced about like the 6 Plus. I think that's a little too big for me. It just feels a little big in my pocket. But I understand that I'm in the minority. I think fundamentally that's where people are going. I just think the word phablet is really ugly, but I think that's definitely the kind of device that people are going to be using.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate the discussion, everyone. I want to thank our guests this week, Andrew Lee from American University, Anthony Hott at TechCrunch, Douglas Hebard at Talking New Media, Mario Garcia at Garcia Media, and our producer Jefferson Yen. You can catch us each and every week on mediashift.org. You can follow us on Twitter at the Mediatwits. You can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe on iTunes. Leave us a good review. I want to thank our sponsor, Next Space and Next Kids. You can catch us next week. Thanks, everyone.